A 49-year-old grandmother from San Antonio, seat 19 degrees Celsius, felt the Boeing 737-800 shudder twice over the Colorado Rockies when the captain's voice cracked over the intercom, and 30 seconds later the first officer was asking if anyone on board had ever touched real flight controls before. The flight was Horizon 1427 out of San Antonio bound for Chicago O'Hare, carrying 147 passengers and 6 crew on a crisp October afternoon. What started as a routine 4-hour hop through building weather became something no training manual prepares you for. The person who would have to answer that call from the cockpit was the last one anyone expected. Before we go any further, drop a comment below. What state are you watching from? I read every single one. And if this is the kind of story you came here for, subscribe. There are more coming. Elena Ramirez adjusted the thin blanket across her lap and tried to ignore the way her stomach had tightened. She looked like what she had become, a silver-haired woman in comfortable sneakers and a faded denim jacket, carrying a small woven bag filled with knitting and lemon drops for her granddaughter. Nobody on this plane knew she used to keep F-16 avionics running in the heat of the Nevada desert 25 years ago. The flight attendant, a polite young man named Tyler, leaned over her row with the gentle patience people reserve for grandmothers. "Everything all right, ma'am? You've been staring out that window for a while." Elena offered a small smile. "Just thinking about my granddaughter's soccer game I might miss if we land late." "You know how it is." Tyler nodded kindly. "We'll get you there. These mountains can be bumpy, but the pilots have seen it all. Can I bring you another water?" She thanked him and watched him move on. Alone again, she slipped her hand into her bag and touched the small silver cross on a leather cord, the one her father had given her the day she made chief on the flight line. "This keeps the birds honest," he'd said. She hadn't worn it in years until this trip. Today it felt heavier than it should. Inside her head, the voice was louder than it had been in a long time. "You're not that person anymore, Elena. Let the professionals handle it." But another part of her, quieter and older, kept noticing the subtle changes in engine note that most passengers would never catch. She closed her eyes as the plane leveled at 34,000 feet. On the surface she looked completely at peace. Underneath, something uneasy had already begun to stir. Memories came in fragments during the smooth part of the climb. She remembered her father in the old hangar in Texas, grease on his hands, teaching her how to read the IKS screens before most civilian pilots had even seen them. He had lost his own Captain Medical years earlier after a heart scare. The lessons weren't about flying the plane. They were about understanding what the plane was trying to tell you when it started to lie. "I don't get it, Papa," she'd said one hot afternoon, frustrated at 16. "When will I ever need to know how to troubleshoot a dual hydraulic fault at altitude?" He had looked at her for a long moment, the kind of look that carried more weight than the answer. "Mija, the sky doesn't care what your job title is. It only cares if you're paying attention." That line lived in her bones now. She remembered the simulator sessions he somehow got her into through old military contacts. The way the seat would shake, the way your mouth went dry when the master caution lit up like a Christmas tree. She learned that the most dangerous thing in an airplane isn't the emergency itself. It's the 30 seconds after, when everyone is still pretending everything is fine. One surprising thing most people don't realize: commercial airliners are designed so that a single pilot can, in theory, land them. But the procedures assume that pilot is trained, current, and not watching their colleague collapse beside them. The human factor changes everything. Elena opened her eyes as the plane hit the first pocket of turbulence. The seatbelt sign chimed on. She told herself it was nothing. But then the captain's voice came over the speakers again, slower this time, slightly slurred on the edges. In the cockpit, Captain Mike Reynolds and First Officer Lauren Park were trading quiet conversation about Lauren's upcoming wedding. Mike was 58, steady, the kind of captain who still called the flight attendants by name. Lauren was 29, sharp, but only had 900 hours in the 737. The cabin was calm. A young father in 12D showed his daughter how to spot mountain peaks through the window. An older couple in business class held hands across the aisle, celebrating their 40th anniversary. The smell of coffee and recycled air mixed with the faint metallic tang that always seemed stronger over the mountains. Elena noticed a faint vibration in the floor that didn't match the engines. She dismissed it. Planes make all kinds of sounds. Not everything that looks fine is fine. The first wrong note came when the captain's voice disappeared mid-announcement. Just stopped. Elena sat up straighter. A minute later, the first officer's voice came on, trying to sound calm but missing the professional rhythm. Folks, we're experiencing a minor medical issue up here. If there is a doctor or medical professional on board, please ring your call button. 2 doctors responded. They were escorted forward. Elena stayed in her seat, heart hammering. Not your job. Not anymore. Then the senior flight attendant came back into the cabin, face pale. The doctors had confirmed it. Captain Reynolds was having a stroke. First Officer Park was now the only qualified pilot, and the turbulence was getting worse as they approached a line of severe thunderstorms. The crack widened when the first officer's voice cracked over the intercom, asking again, more urgently, if anyone had any flight experience at all, any military background, anything. Elena felt her father's words echo. She knew what came next if nobody stepped up. The plane would eventually run out of options as fuel burned down and weather closed in. She could stay invisible, protect the quiet life she'd built after her father passed. Or she could stand up and risk becoming the story that would follow her forever. I want you to think about what you would have done in her position. Hold on to that thought. Stay with me here, because what happens in the next few minutes is the part nobody talks about. And once you hear it, you won't be able to forget it. Elena stood up. The flight attendant looked at her with gentle disbelief when she reached the forward galley. Ma'am, we appreciate your willingness, but we really need— I was an Air Force avionics chief, Elena said quietly. I know these systems. Not as a pilot, but I know what they're supposed to say. They almost turned her away. Then the first officer's voice came through the intercom again, tight with fear. We're getting cascading warnings. I need help up here. Elena was rushed forward. Lauren Park looked at her with exhausted eyes. You understand this isn't a game, right? I can't let some— Elena reached past her without permission and pointed to the PFD. You're in VNAV mode, but the autopilot is fighting rudder input it shouldn't need. That's not normal for this turbulence. She performed a quick check on the overhead panel that only someone who had spent years reading the logic would know how to do. Then she asked a simple question. Why hasn't the standby attitude indicator been cross-checked against the IRS since the captain went down? Lauren stared. The weight of the decision pressed on her young shoulders. She made the call. Help me, she said. Elena slipped into the captain's seat. The silver cross brushed against her collarbone. It felt different now. She glanced out at the mountains below and thought of all the families in the back who had no idea how close they were to the edge. The control yoke felt heavier than she remembered. Her hands were shaking, but they knew where to go. The instruments painted a difficult picture, heavy icing building on the wings, partial pitot static failure from the storm, and the first officer's hands were trembling on the controls. Fuel was manageable, but they were being vectored around weather that was closing fast. All right, Elena said, voice steadier than she felt. We're going to hand-fly this down. I need you to stay on the radios. Tell Denver Center we're declaring an emergency, squawk 700700. She took the aircraft. The mentor's voice arrived clear in her memory. The sky doesn't care what your job title is. They descended step by agonizing step. Elena talked through every call-out, every cross-check. Lauren's voice grew stronger as she watched the older woman work the systems with muscle memory she didn't know she still had. Then came the crisis inside the crisis. The left engine started surging from ice ingestion, not in any simulator profile they'd practiced. Elena felt panic rise. For 3 long seconds she froze. Then she remembered her father telling her once, after a bad landing, sometimes you just have to talk to it like it's scared too. She reduced power gently, talked to the engine like it was a frightened animal, and used the cross-bleed valve in a way most pilots wouldn't think to try. The surge stopped. Barely. In the middle of it all, Lauren reached over and squeezed her forearm for just a second. No words. Just the briefest human touch between 2 terrified women doing the impossible. It was completely out of place, which made it perfect. The approach into Denver was the longest 10 minutes of Elena's life. Every call to the tower stretched. Decision height came and went. The runway lights appeared through the driving snow like a promise she wasn't sure they deserved. Flaps 30, she called. Gear down. Her father's words came back exactly when she needed them. The sky doesn't care what your job title is. For one terrible heartbeat on short final, she doubted everything. The runway seemed too short, the crosswind too strong. Then the mains touched, hard but down. The nose followed. Thrust reversers roared. They rolled out safely, though the left main tire blew on the wet runway. The cockpit fell into silence. Elena's hands wouldn't stop shaking even after they parked at the gate. Her legs felt like water when she tried to stand. She had the strangest urge to both laugh and cry at the same time. Lauren looked at her with something close to awe and said simply, "Thank you for not letting me do that alone." Passengers later described the quietest deplaning they'd ever seen. One little girl in 19 degrees Celsius told her mother the nice grandma had saved them. The mother cried. The company response was professional and grateful, but the real moment came 3 weeks later when Elena met her father's old friend, the retired instructor who had helped train her all those years ago, at a small airfield outside San Antonio. They sat on the same bench where her father used to tell stories. No big speeches. He just put his hand over hers and nodded once. The silver cross caught the sunlight between them. It didn't feel heavy anymore. For a moment, before the news crews and airline people arrived to turn it all into headlines, Elena stood alone on the ramp looking at the mountains in the distance. Months later, life had mostly gone back to normal. Elena still went to her granddaughter's soccer games. People sometimes recognized her at the grocery store, but the attention never quite fit. She visited the old instructor again on a quiet Tuesday, same bench, same smell of jet fuel and dry grass. She asked the question that had been living in her since that day. Was I ready for what happened up there? Or did that moment make me ready? He thought for a long time. Both, he said finally. And neither. The truth is we spend our whole lives becoming the person who might be needed one day. Most of us never find out if we got there. You did, he paused. But it doesn't make you special, mija. It just means you were paying attention when the sky asked. If this story moved you, I have more where this came from. Subscribe so you don't miss what's next. And leave a comment below telling me which moment in this story stayed with you. I genuinely want to know. Some people spend their whole lives flying. Others only step into the sky once, when it needs them most.